All right, hello everyone and welcome. It is 10 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Before we start our program, I just wanna make sure that everyone can see and hear me. So if you could go ahead and post in the chat that you can see and hear all right, that would be great. All right, I'm getting lots of yeses, so it looks like we're good to get started. So welcome everyone to today's program. Let's see. So welcome. The LACONI POP Board is very excited to present Building Connections, Community Engagement 101. My name is Clarice Swanson, and I am your host today. I am currently the Adult and Teen Services Programming Coordinator at the New Lenox Public Library, and I have been a board representative of the LACONI POP Board since April. So on behalf of the entire board, I want to thank you all for being here today. First, I want to go over some general housekeeping items. Our program will consist of two presenters, Lynn Williamson, who is the Chief of Neighborhood Library Services at the Free Library of Philadelphia and the Project Director for the Skills for Community-Centered Libraries Initiative, and Cindy Fesemyer, who is the Principal at Fesemyer Consulting and the former Director of the Columbus Public Library in Wisconsin. So after these two presenters, we will have time for a brief Q&A session. Both the presentation and the Q&A will be recorded and sent to all registrants when they become available, along with the slides and the presenter contact information. So please remember that this is a webinar, so we cannot see or hear any of you. If you have any questions for the Q&A, go ahead and put them in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and we'll ask them at the end of the webinar. We also have live transcript turned on, so if you need subtitles, you can activate those as well. So without further ado, I want to welcome our first speaker, Lynn Williamson.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. Uh-oh, having trouble advancing my slides. There we go. Okay. Minor technical difficulty. Good morning. Thank you for joining us this morning to talk about the building connections with our communities. We've planned this webinar so that first, I will give you some background about the Skills for Community-Centered Libraries curriculum, a training program that the Free Library of Philadelphia has been developing for the past several years. And then I'll discuss some highlights from the first workshop of the series. Next, I'll pass the baton to Cindy Fesemyer, who will go into some details about networking tips and tricks, a core skill of community engagement. The Skills for Community-Centered Libraries curriculum was created over the past several years with the support of an IMLS Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Program grant, and together with 7 partner libraries across the US and Canada. Previous community engagement training curricula were often designed only for administrators, or they were expensive training sessions. We put together this curriculum with frontline library staff in mind, and it is freely available now to all libraries at the Free Library's website at www.freelibrary.org/community-centered. This curriculum is designed to be accessible to all library workers and is adaptable for board members, volunteers, or friends. It includes 4 workshops of 4 hours each and is adaptable to the online training environment. The titles of each of the 4 workshops for this curriculum are Building Connections, Effective Communication, Program Development, and Community Engagement. I will not be summarizing the entirety of the 4-hour Building Connections workshop in just a few minutes. Our goal is to give an overview and share some of the most well-received parts, and then dive into networking specifically. This is a space for you to reflect on your work and to create small shifts in your professional practices and mindset toward the common goal of community engagement for your communities as defined by your communities. The purpose of building connections is to assess and understand the strengths you already have. Consider how your strengths fit into your team's strengths, and then how you may build on those strengths together through community engagement in order to improve your library, its services, and its connections with the community. We learned when piloting this curriculum to value and hold up the skills and connections that our colleagues already have. If staff members and colleagues have expertise, we encourage them as participants to share their expertise and experiences with colleagues that are new to engagement. That way we all learn from each other. We use the workshop to examine the unique strengths you possess that allow you to connect with your community. Another thing that we have learned is that depending upon your role within your community, within your library, the community that you serve may look very different. This is why it is so important to train all staff in community engagement. A children's librarian may interact differently with your community than a page, or than security staff, and then again differently than staff who work at the circ desk. Your friends, your volunteers, board members, they will all have different insights into your community as well. And all those roles and insights have important things to contribute. The skill set developed during the curriculum benefits all library communities, including a traditional library branch, volunteers, academics and students, and supervisors who are training their fellow staff members. One thing I notice over and over again as a librarian and as a library practitioner for the last 26 years is how often we in the field morph the difference between community outreach and community engagement. And although I'm sure many of you have been involved in discussions or training about this before, it's always worth reinforcing as a part of our common practice together how these two concepts, although similar, are actually quite different. Community outreach is one direction. It's building awareness and sharing information about programs, resources, and services with people in a community. It's only going one direction. So I'd like for you participants to think for a minute, what are some examples of outreach that you have done or that your library does? And I'll look for a minute in the chat for some of your responses. I see local parades, farmers markets, tabling at school open houses, and local festivals, community festivals, Chamber of Commerce meetings, fire department open house, right? Yeah. Thank you for those contributions. Whoops. So community engagement is building relationships between staff and surrounding communities to empower people to take ownership of their library and its resources. Engagement is an active two-way partnership that serves the interest of local communities and the public good, and it's a bit more revolutionary than outreach because if done well, engagement can level set power structures between the library and the community. So, what are some examples of engagement at your libraries? That might take a little bit more than a couple words to describe since it's going two directions. Serving on village communities and volunteer programs where there's direction going both ways, library board. Focus groups are a really important part of that, yes. Thanks. So at the Free Library, I have been involved in what feels like 101 or maybe 1,001 outreach assignments over the years, as I'm sure most of you have. To daycares and schools, senior centers, civic associations, community fairs, some of those things that you as participants have mentioned just a minute ago, all with the goal of telling people how fabulous my library is. But when we meet first with the community to discover their wants and needs before we start planning the programming, then when we have those two-way discussions, that's when we're doing engagement. And when we're having a conversation with a partner or a community representative that takes us sometimes out of our comfort zone to consider something that we might not have done before, that may also be doing community engagement. In the curriculum for Workshop 1, Building Connections, participants work in groups and individually to consider their personal strengths and later to think about team roles. Small groups discuss team dynamics and how personal strengths and team roles often intersect, as well as when they do not. Participants reflect on which roles seem most comfortable for them, which ones they could stretch into, and which are just the most uncomfortable. After that hard work, participants get a short break, and then they come back together again to discuss what a community asset is. After having defined and discussed assets, we move to discovering assets in our communities and how to map them while providing different examples. Participants consider how to use the idea of team roles and assets to go out and network in the community toward common goals, whether that's establishing a stakeholder council, finding volunteers or contributors with strengths that the library needs to build ties with the community, or something else. Participants consider opportunities to create partnerships with community assets in order to better serve the needs of their communities. After reflecting on personal strengths, personal purposes, and roles, they craft and practice a networking introduction that highlights their work and the work of their library for the community that can be used to further connect. Ultimately, participants gain a greater understanding of why it's important to step outside of your library and connect with the community at large, and they also develop the tools and motivation to take that action. In a few moments, Cindy is going to walk us through the part of the workshop that is specifically about networking, having the tools and skills ready to go out and engage with people in the community about your library. But now I want to talk for a couple of minutes about the concept of community assets. So if you Google the definition of asset, you'll find a useful or valuable thing, person, or quality. In Building Connections, we flesh out the concept of a community asset to be much more. When you hear the phrase community asset, what words and ideas come to your mind? How do you conceive of this term as it relates to your library work? What does community asset mean? Adding value to the community. Yeah. So the library is an asset to the community as well as other organizations and partners in the community. Partnership, a place that supports patrons and community members, right? A unique resource in the community. Yeah, volunteer networks, definitely beneficial, valuable partnerships. Thank you for that. The curriculum defines community assets as individuals, including their knowledge, skills, attitudes, talents, awareness, and social connections, everything that they embody, and community organizations and larger institutions that provide resources and services to your local community. So individuals sharing their knowledge, skills, or time are us, library staff, maybe even library staff that haven't ever participated in any kind of outreach or engagement before. Also individuals that you know in your communities, your friends, your partners, your stakeholders in the library. Community organizations, local businesses, meaning it could be mom and pop organizations or larger for-profit businesses, arts organizations, advocacy groups, civic associations and civic groups, and faith-based organizations. And institutions, thinking of larger groups like hospitals or hospital networks, community colleges or universities and their networks, police and fire departments, school systems and local schools, and parks and rec departments. So what are some community assets that come to mind for your library? And maybe even to focus this question a little bit more for today, for where we are now, what community assets have been the most helpful to your library during the COVID-19 pandemic? Just as a way of framing how we're thinking about community assets. Right, I see an idea, vaccination walk-in clinics, and also a partnership for Movie on the Lawn with the parks. Working strongly with the village and connecting and building a website to share pandemic news. Library friends, health department communications, and reoccurring meetings. I know our connection here in Philadelphia with the health department has been so critical. Yeah, school district, absolutely, especially now, return to school and all the questions that raises. Thanks, everyone. So a list of assets or an asset map can help capture organizations in the community and the relationships between and among them as means for creating new contacts and connections. So here's some ideas, some steps about compiling a list or a map. When you're working with your library colleagues or stakeholders, you need to decide together what kind of format works well for you. Our curriculum has several different examples of asset maps, but it doesn't have to be a format that's been used previously. It can be a format that just works well for your group. Number 2, tailor your asset map for a specific program or idea of interest, because it can be very overwhelming to compile an asset map over all areas for a library or institution. So start with a smaller area of focus. And consider the connections among assets. So if you're thinking about outreach or if you're thinking about families and family engagement, not only do you want to think for your asset map about the schools and daycares and after school activities, but also maybe how does the police department do story times at the school? Does the fire department do fire education programs at the school? And knowing that, how might that change your ideas of how you would either engage and ask the fire department to work with you at the library, or how might that change how you work with your school? Number 4, think about how you could leverage specific assets to create new partnerships and programs. So example, if there are a large number of arts organizations or arboretums, for example, in your neighborhood, could they join forces to support programming at the library? And something really key about this list or map is the idea that it's a living document. So I think we all know that our communities and our neighborhoods change over time. And also the library's needs for compiling that document is going to change over time. So it needs to be flexible in order to kind of be useful for any given purpose and to maintain its currency over time. And also as partnerships change with the library and with other organizations. So let's see, this set of steps that you might consider doing together with a group of colleagues, friends, and volunteers will help you think about where you can get more interconnection with your library in the community. And then I just wanted to take a minute to think through together about some of these questions that are on the screen right now. Thinking about the community assets with which your library has relationships. How did you or your library start those relationships? And how are those relationships maintained and nurtured? So you can learn by thinking about your strong partnerships already. How did those start and how are they maintained well? And then try to take those learnings when you're starting new relationships with other types of organizations. Are there things that are transferable about those successes? Identify asset gaps in the map or list that you created for your library. So maybe as you're assembling your list, you realize that you don't have any partnerships with groups that are concerned about food insecurity in your community, or you realize that there's some other gap that you had missed before when you're working with your group. Oftentimes the hardest thing to identify is what's missing rather than obviously what's there. And number 3, think about 2 or 3 new community assets you believe would be helpful to your library programming, and then make a plan with your team. How is it best to engage those assets? Do you already have contacts? Does somebody you know already have contacts that might be able to open the door for you? Does the group have a reputation in the community that a cold call would be welcome? And if not, how can you get those doors opened for your communication? Number 4, does your neighborhood library have a system for tracking your assets? So if you have a lot of different people working on building out a list or community map, you need people to be able to add things as they learn them. So considering a shared binder at a reference desk, or something that we use, a shared Google Doc, so people can add and edit as things change, can be helpful. So the ultimate goal here is to connect with the community, and feeling uncomfortable about doing that networking and doing it outside the library, like physically outside of the library, can be a little bit overwhelming. And that's where Cindy is going to take over and give us some more tips and tricks about that actual networking piece. Cindy.
Great. Thanks, Lynn. Good introduction. I'm so excited that the curriculum is released. And just to reiterate, Lynn and I together are talking about just some small portions of the first workshop in a 4-part series that comes out of the Free Library of Philadelphia. And so what we're going to do now is just dive into a small piece of that first workshop. Lynn just talked about it. She talked about networking. So networking is, it's all about people, right? And ultimately, hopefully, it's about partnerships between your library and individuals and organizations that are represented out in the community. So to be engaged, you need to connect with those people. We know that you may not have gone into this profession because you're excited about connecting with people in a community way. A lot of library staff are very comfortable within your building, but what we're talking about is leaving your building and getting out in the community and integrating with the pace of life in the place that your library serves. So, knowing that not everybody is comfortable just jumping right in, what we're going to do is sort of practice our approach to jumping into the community. And it takes time and it takes practice to build up your confidence. So this will just be a first step in that. Next slide, please, Lynn. Great. So what we're going to do is start with a little very short free writing. So get out your pen, get out your paper, open a new document on your computer, whatever you need to do. If you just want to sit and ponder, that's okay. But we're going to talk about these 3 questions together. And this first networking set of questions is just to get an idea where you're at, basically. From seeing the responses in chat about your outreach and engagement programs, it's clear that some of you have been doing this for years probably, but I'm guessing those of you we didn't hear from maybe aren't so comfortable. So let's figure out where you're at. So what I want to do is I want to start on this slide with, we're going to spend 3 minutes on these questions. So do the math, that's 1 minute per question. So it's going to move really quickly. I want you to start right now by describing the type of networking experience you personally have engaged in as part of your library outreach. So we talked about it a little bit in the chat, but I want you to think about yourself, not your library, but you. What have you done to engage your network within your community? Right, for 1 minute, please. Okay, wrap up that thought. We'll go on to the next question in a moment. The second question is fun. What aspects of networking do you find the most challenging? And there are a lot of challenges. So for you personally, what is the most challenging obstacle to successfully networking within your community? Right, for 1 minute, please. I know there are a lot of challenges, but please wrap up your thought right now. And we'll move on to the third questions. What strategies have you personally employed that led to new connections within your community or a new partnership, a new program with other folks in the community? What have you personally done to create that connection? 1 minute of writing, please. Okay, please wrap up that thought about strategies. All right, Hands off keyboards, pencils down. Let's share our thoughts a little bit. I see a few of you were sharing in the chat along the way, and that's spectacular. But what I want to do is focus on question number 2. What do you find the most challenging about networking within your community? I want us to have a chat storm. So go ahead and enter succinctly into the chat your challenges to networking. I see time. The initial cold call I saw was tough, coming up with ideas and topics. Time. Oh, attending events alone. That's a really good one. Actually getting your foot in the door, huge. People won't get back to you when you reach out. Asking the right questions, finding the right place to talk. These are, keep chatting up a storm. You guys are going way faster than I can read. This is terrific. Perfecting the pitch. This is some stuff we're going to talk about today. Outreach when you don't know the community. Ooh, I can feel that. Being put on the spot with questions you might not have the answers to. Great. Getting commitments. Ooh, being recognized by the municipality as a community player. That's huge. Thanks for sharing that. Explaining what the library does, sure. Getting connected with non-traditional library partners. Good for you in trying to do that. Not living close to the community. These are excellent challenges. And I have to say, personally, when I've worked in libraries, I've experienced all of these and more. Feeling that those networks working are aligned with mission and worldview of the library, finding the right events to participate. Perfect. So what we're going to do is try and overcome some of those obstacles together very briefly in our limited amount of time together. So can I have the next slide, please, Lynn? What we're going to do is talk about that initial pitch. So if being the only person in the room is scary, if making an initial call is scary, if you don't know how to talk about yourself, if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, we're going to just do a little bit of homework together that hopefully by pre-preparing for those kinds of situations, you will be slightly more comfortable in moving forward and talking to someone maybe you haven't spoken with before or that you don't know very well. So we're going to talk about kind of our introduction to the community and what you would do if, say, you're new to the community and you find yourself as the only library representative in the room of community stakeholders. You're going to work out your pitch of who you are. So these bullet points on this slide are things that you might consider sharing when you introduce yourself. Your name, your position, the name of the library, what the library offers the community, including like space and e-resources and all the things that are usual in your usual pitch. But then I think you need to think about your goal, your aspiration for your library in working with, for, and by your community. Think about your personal purpose within the library. What do you enjoy the most? Your passion will come through in there. And if you have time, you can talk about how you share your mission and purpose with the community, including social media, website, newsletters, all those things. So what we're going to do is spend 5 solid minutes crafting this approach together. For those of you who are new to this work or don't have confidence in introducing yourself cold, this is you writing your first script. For those of you who are totally doing partnerships and out in the community, this is your chance to take a moment and ponder what it is you've been doing and hone your approach and see if you can come up with 2 or 3 bullet points that are very meaningful to you and your community. So you're either starting new or honing the approach that you already use. And we're going to do that for 5 solid minutes. So I'm going to keep my video on. I'll keep track of time, but we're going to do this until 10:39. Please start writing. I'm going to short us about a minute, so finish in the next minute or so, please. Can I have the next slide, please, Lynn? Okay, finish up your current sentence, please. And we're quickly just going to go through some tips that you can use to prepare yourself mentally and the content of what you're going to say when you meet with folks from your community. So tip number one, prepare. We just spent a little time doing that. You may want to go back and spend some more time doing that and honing your approach and being thoughtful about what you say, what you share. So there also might be something topical and current. Is there something right now that your library is launching that might be of particular interest to some groups or individuals in the community? Or is there something happening in the community that is particularly of interest to discuss right now? Tip one, prepare. Next slide, please. Tip two, super easy, smile. We know it goes a long way. When I first came onto this webinar, I had kind of resting frowny face on, and I saw in my thumbnail that I wasn't looking too approachable. So I put on a little smile, and all of a sudden I felt better. I hope you felt better. Smiling takes us a long way. Next slide, please. The third tip is to find common ground. So this is just on a personal conversational level to make those connections with somebody, in part so that you remember a little something about them and hopefully they remember a little something about you. So what brought people there that day, what organization are they with, and then little question, how long have you been there, what do you do, have you been to this before, what was your experience? And I personally like to get a little bit personal, and maybe some of you aren't comfortable, but people love to talk about their children, their pets, their relatives, their trips, their hobbies. So just find those kinds of things that are your go-to gimme easy questions that if you're feeling a little uncomfortable, you know you can talk about your cat and ask about somebody's dog. Next slide, please. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about power questions now. These are the kind of questions that really start making those organizational connections and can ensure current two-way conversation between you and the person or persons you're speaking with, and then hopefully carry that into the future so that you have something to continue talking about next time you end up together. There are 3 brands of power questions: showing interest, learning a new way of thinking, and building trust. Next slide, please. These are some of sample questions on showing interest. I talked about them a little bit a couple slides ago. How'd you get started? What do you do with your group? What do you think about this current thing happening in the community? I invite you for a minute to either on your own or share in chat other interest questions that you might ask people to just show interest in their work or them as a person. Do you have a go-to that you like to engage people with? What is your power question to show interest in community partners? Please feel free to enter something into the chat if you'd like. Where are you located? Oh, I like this one from Katie. What's your dream project with your organization? That is terrific. That is aspirational. Perfect. What's a typical day in the life of you and your organization look like? What are your organization's goals for the coming year? That's really huge because you know what your goals are for your library and you can find some common ground there, I betcha. Let's move on to the next slide, please, Lynn. The second power question is about learning ways of thinking. So we already talked about some challenges in networking, but what about challenges for your potential partner's organization? What have they tried to do to tackle those problems? Has it worked? Has it not worked? And just asking people why they do this kind of work can help them get very personal too. what are some power questions that you might rely on that help you learn about the way that folks are thinking in your community? Please enter those into chat. So I'm seeing kind of from the previous question and this one too, people do their research, compliment them on their last project. What are their goals around the project or the organization? Are you reaching them? Generally, I know someone they know and name drop to start an easy conversation. That is an awesome tip. Thanks for that, Courtney. Definitely like 1 degree of separation is terrific for getting people to chat a little bit. Melissa says, how have your connections been going? What events do you have coming up? That's great. And then that gives you the opportunity to share what events are coming up for you in your library. How did you get to your mission? How do you get your mission to your community? That's huge. It's about communication. Let's look at the third power question on the next slide, please, Lynn. This one is about building trust. So is there anything that I can do to be helpful to your mission or tackling that challenge? Do you think the library has any resources that might help you? How can we help each other achieve our goals? And surely you have some goals in common if you're interested in helping the community. What other go-tos might you have that you would ask people in order to build trust with them, to build those bridges that might last well into the future? Trust building power questions. Please feel free to enter them into the chat. As you're pondering that, I will say that asking for help goes a really long way in building trust. So in addition to asking people if you can help them, don't be shy about asking them to help you. I know that at your organization, you have a really great listserv for parents for the local public school. Might you consider sharing this message or this program? Katie says, asking similar questions like, would you like to partner to approach another organization? Oh, that's great. So build a partnership in order to build a more vast partnership. I love that. Thanks. So we're going to go through the last few slides quickly so that we can get to your questions. Can I have the next slide, please, Lynn? So in case you haven't guessed, networking is a skill. It might be something that more people are simply born feeling, more comfortable just making small talk or asking hard questions and everything in between. But truly, not that many people are born with that skill. They practice it. You don't have to be a blatant extrovert in order to network. I promise you that I'm an introvert. I recharge by reading my book, watching TV, making a delicious meal. I don't recharge by going to big parties, but I can fake it. And that's what we do. We fake it till we make it. And that's why you need to practice these skills. So it's something that you can turn on and turn off. When you don't need to be on in cheerleading, you don't have to be, but you do have to practice in order to gain comfort, but in order to be a little bit of an expert within your community on kind of what's going on. So get out there and get practicing. Next slide, please. That's us. That's what we have to bring to you today. Lynn, I'll invite you to turn your camera and your microphone back on. And this is the link that Lynn mentioned at the top of her part of the presentation to get to the materials and connection information for us. Any questions? And we'll leave it to, I don't know, Clarice, Kate, somebody to sort of moderate the questions. Great.
Perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Lynn and Cindy. This is a lot of great information. So a reminder to all of our attendees, if you have any specific questions you'd like to ask Lynn or Cindy, go ahead and put it in the Q&A feature. I did have a question for you guys. When it comes to rebuilding partnerships that previously haven't gone well, maybe because of a previous conflict or something like that, do you guys have any advice for rebuilding partnerships that haven't gone well in the past?
Do you want me to kick us off, Lynn?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I'm going to say that you want to change up at least one of the elements that was within that. So bring somebody else, somebody different to the table with you, have a new challenge that you're looking to tackle or a new take on an existing challenge. To just go back to the table for the sake of going back to the table, I think you might not get very far. I think you need to bring something new to the table. And honestly, in my experience, if it's like a personality clash between you and somebody else, maybe that means that you can take yourself out of the equation for a while, ask another staff person to step in your place, and perhaps bring you in down the road if that's your area of expertise. But honestly, just bring something new to the table, even if you have to kind of manufacture that thing just to give you the opportunity to make another call to try again.
That's fantastic.
I would agree with that. And also, sometimes it just pays if you have the luxury of waiting for a little time to pass and for the environment to change a little bit, which ties into what Cindy was just saying. Sometimes the emphasis, a year later will be on a slightly different aspect of your shared work together, and you can use that as a restart. But to just you don't want to bang your head against the wall on something and make the brick even harder by trying the same way over and over again. So different approaches and different personalities could help a lot.
And I'll just add, those different approaches are really important the bigger the organization is. So in my previous role in the Columbus Public Library in Wisconsin, a natural partner is the schools, right? And we traditionally could not connect with the high school. Just nobody returned our calls until ultimately we found a single teacher who was very into our local history collection or something like that. And we leveraged our relationship with that single teacher to get us to the right people within the school. So sometimes, as somebody mentioned in the chat a while ago, it's not the direct connection, but it's that 1 degree of separation that might get you there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have another question. What is the most out of the ordinary partnership one of you guys have developed, and why was it surprising?
I can take that one. I won't take credit for the out of the the unusual partnership. Well, I think of two actually. We have a rare books department at the library that has some very valuable and ancient Muslim manuscripts, and we were able to make a partnership with some imams in the Muslim community in Philadelphia that really helped open up possibilities to reach the members and the people that they work with, and opened up a lot of doors. It was a really awesome thing to witness, that something that we'd had trouble making those connections before really opened up in such a beautiful way. And then I also think, but I think this happens a lot now, and not so unusual, is the reading to a dog phenomenon. I think many of you probably have programs where youngsters who are learning to read to a dog. And when that first started at the library, it was a lovely thing to see and kind of out of the ordinary.
I'll read something out of the chat from Jillian. They have a partnership with a local brewery to do trivia night once a month that her predecessor set up. And that's something that we did in Columbus as well, although we moved between bars month to month, just to kind of share the level a little bit. That's very cool. Thanks for mentioning that.
We have a goat yoga program. That's kind of an unusual one at one of our libraries.
Oh, yoga has become very popular. Okay, another question is, how do I make connections if I am not looking for it to end in programming?
Oh, I'll take that one. I will happily kick that one off. So all you do is a coffee chat, right? So or whatever the equivalent is for you. I really think that simply saying, "Hey, I'm new in my position," or "Hey, you're new in your position," or "There's this new program," or whatever, using something like that as an excuse to kind of ask for a first date is what you can do, but you don't have to come together to like solve all the community's problems in a single sit down. I think it is so valuable for library staff to simply have that first coffee date with anybody and everybody within the community who is in a position to care about the community and perhaps somewhere down the road affect some kind of change. So there's a lot to be said for just getting to know people for the sake of getting to know people. A bigger network leads to a bigger network. And then something may come down the road that is something that you want to work on together. Perhaps you or they get a funding opportunity. And like 2 years ago, you started having regular coffee dates, and now is the time that you move. I just really believe that the more professional connections that you have within your own network, the better off you are. And honestly, the more likely folks in the community are to come to the library first when something comes up in the community. And I think that's a sign of true progress and a little bit of power within your community if you're the first one that they think of because you know so many people.
Also, when you approach that first community connection with a specific goal in mind, you might be closing doors on other possibilities. So, starting a conversation that's very wide and open could, open up doors later on, or surface some ideas that wouldn't come up if you were really keeping your conversation very structured.
All right. We're getting lots of questions now. Definitely keeping the ball rolling. So next question is, how do you hold partners to their agreements, and do you always need a formal signed agreement?
From my perspective, and this might be different depending on your library system and your board, it might be defined by your particular employer, but there are so many different kinds of partnerships. When it involves staff time or funding, I think that's when you really need to have a memorandum of understanding or some such to be able to document that. Also, the first part of the question, how do you hold a partner accountable for what they've agreed to? I think that also depends a lot on the context of the relationship and other stakeholders that you might have that could nudge them, or you never want to pull rank because that usually isn't helpful, but more creative ideas about nudging, or laying out how advantageous it is for that person to follow through with their responsibilities. Some kind of a reward either to themselves as being seen as the successful person who pulled out this wonderful program. If they get some of the reward or the first acknowledgement, sometimes that can help as well.
I agree with you, although I am going to go on the other end of the spectrum from like MOUs and or MOUs and formal agreements. Memorandum of Understanding is an MOU. So my library was relatively rural. We served about 5,000 people in a heavily agricultural area, and there weren't a lot of formalized policies. So there were none within the library, and virtually none within the municipality as a whole about insurance or food or funding, sharing funding. So I decided to sort of exploit that and just try stuff and do it very casually. And I really, really recommend that you don't formalize anything in the beginning, because that can be a stumbling block. You want to just start with, like somebody said in the chat, just start with a small project that you can do together that includes really no additional monies or not too much extra staff time, and get that win under your belt and see what it felt like. And then maybe it leads to something bigger, and maybe eventually you're going to need some kind of MOU because you wrote a grant together. But I think that starting small and starting a little stealthy and trying to stay under the radar of bureaucratic powers that be is a nice way to go. I know not everybody has that luxury, but if you do, work within those bounds if you can, and do something small together and build on it.
I think that's a really great perspective too. And then I'm going to say this is going to be our last question because it's a little bit hardier one. When library staff are going on first dates to build a network, how can they most successfully share back their learning with all library staff who need to know what they've learned?
So within my library, we had the distinct privilege of being able to have a monthly staff meeting. My library board president was a former librarian, and he would literally work the desk so that we could all eat lunch together and have a quick meeting. And during that time, we always had sharebacks. We also, obviously, a long time passes between meetings, or perhaps you don't have meetings. We had a running staff wiki, or it could be a Google Doc. It can be whatever you want, where we just added kind of community data, community lore that we collected either when we were out and about in the community, or most importantly, kind of scuttlebutt that we got over a circulation desk. And we would share that with each other. And that didn't matter what floor you worked on or what shift you usually worked, you could catch up the next time you were in and see what was going on. And the big stuff that rose up in there, we would address at staff meetings.
Yeah, it's interesting that we've used some of those same strategies in a larger institution as well. Yeah, I don't necessarily have anything else to add. It kind of depends on the group that you're working with and what you collectively decide. I think I touched on this in one of my slides too. What you collectively decide makes sense for you. Although I would say that Google Docs is an absolutely wonderful collaborative software, and we use it so much now.
When I first started at my library, it was literally a little notebook next to one of the circulation desks, but we had 2 floors. It was an old Carnegie, so 2 floors. And how did you communicate between floors? And yeah, it was some kind of electronic tool that can solve that quite easily.
Excellent. Well, thank you both again. And on behalf of the LACONI Pop Board, I want to thank all of our attendees for attending. As mentioned, the program was recorded, and you'll be receiving the link to the recording once it becomes available. And thank you, Lynn and Cindy, for your time and all your wonderful insights. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their Monday.
Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.